Yo, what is up? This is your boy Jesse Williams, aka J Will, from the Dads in Timeout podcast. I just got me a little selfie set up. Got a tripod with my phone on it so I can start shooting some videos. I'm gonna turn this little light on up here, see how that looks. One thing that you guys will notice about me is that I'm not super duper on being extra polished on this. As you can see, I'm just outside Walmart. Got the logo in the background. I'm on my lunch break, and so I always just try to give it to you guys real. I'm still gonna do the podcast with the microphone on the computer, so I can upload that to Spotify, or else I can upload it to Anchor, which will then send it to Spotify and then Apple Podcasts or iTunes, wherever Apple sends their stuff. That light's a little distracting, so I'm gonna turn it off. And it also sends it to like Podbean and Castbox and Google Podcasts. So like if you don't have a subscription to a podcasting service like Spotify or Apple Music / iTunes, and you don't want to just download a thing just for podcasting, well, that's one thing you probably should. But Google Podcasts, if you have an Android phone, you can just download Google Podcasts and it's 100% free, right? And so I know the lighting on this video kind of sucks and this picture isn't nearly as good as I was hoping it was going to be. But I just wanted to let you guys know that I already had a YouTube channel, but I deleted all my videos. So I just kind of want to start fresh. And so if you've been listening to the podcast, you already know that I do a sports podcast. And it's weird because the podcast is called Dads in Timeout, but I don't really talk about dad stuff a whole lot. And I'm going to adjust this for a minute. Sorry about my hand in there. There we go. It was covering up my power button, and I didn't want it to accidentally turn my phone off. But so I was talking about the Dads in Timeout, and how that started was Ian came up with the name, because Ian comes up with all the good like names and graphics and stuff like that. And so he's a dad and I'm a dad, and it's like Dads in Timeout. Like if we get put in timeout or we need to take a timeout like in a game for sports, or take some time out of our day for sports. It's kind of just a play on words. So if you're expecting a whole bunch of like monologues like Colin Cowherd does, which are great, I'm not sure I'll really be doing a lot of that, and trying to relay everything to being a dad, because I don't want to come off as having a shtick. I just sit here and I talk about the NBA, I talk about the NFL, I talk about a little bit of college football, a lot of college football actually, but I don't get into all the recruiting stuff. There's plenty of people who do that. I don't get into betting and gambling and fantasy and all that, just because there's like a million fantasy football podcasts and websites out there, which are great. I'm just more of the guy that likes to talk about what's happening. And so this is the YouTube channel, and we're going to go ahead and get into some things before I have to get back into work and punch that clock and get that money. And so I haven't been on the podcast recently, really just because life gets busy, and I didn't follow college basketball enough this year to really give you guys adequate and thought out takes about the teams in the NCAA tournament. I didn't get to watch a lot of the tournament games. Now, I did get to see like Loyola Chicago and Illinois. I did get to see the end of UCLA and Michigan, parts of UCLA, Alabama. I got to watch Arkansas, Texas Tech. I listened to Arkansas Oral Roberts on the radio because I'm a Razorbacks fan. I live in Arkansas. I watched the entire Arkansas Baylor game. I'm trying to think if there's any other games. I know I tried to catch a lot of the games over the weekend. I watched a little bit of who did Loyola play in the Elite Eight? I can't remember who Loyola played. Oh, they played Oregon State, and I did watch the end of that game. I was going to try to stay up and watch the Gonzaga USC game, but after I saw the score, I was like, I'm good. I was going to watch the USC Oregon game, but I saw the score, and I was like, I'm good. The one thing that is interesting about college basketball, though, is one of my biggest problems with college basketball was the one and done rule. Not because I don't care either way. I just want to make that clear. I have no problems with a player going straight out of high school. I have no problems with a player playing and trying to get his money. Now, I may have thoughts on whether I think that individual player is ready based on his game. I don't really follow it enough to know about the maturity level. And let's be real, like a lot of us, how many of us were super mature at 18? I sure wasn't. Like, I was just beginning to find my way in this world. I mean, I already had a faith base and stuff like that, but I wasn't like really out here having the whole world figured out. I'm 36 now, so I've I see things differently now, and I've been able to grow and experience that. But the great thing about the NCAA tournament is that it does give the world an opportunity to see guys, because there's so many college basketball teams. I mean, you got the 5 or 6 major conferences, because unlike football, like the conferences, like, because on football the Power 5 is the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Pac-12. And I would say all those conferences are Power 5 or top tier conferences in college basketball. But then you got to throw like the Big East in there. And I know it's not the old Big East, but the Big East still has really good teams. And the American Athletic Conference still has really good teams. And the mid-majors aren't as mid-majory anymore. Now, there are still some conferences out there that they send teams to the tournament and they get schwacked. And that wasn't a shot at the SWAC. It's just the word schwacked, like they got whooped. And so you get to see these guys on the biggest stage. And we didn't get to see that last year because of COVID. And so more so than... I mean, I like the tournament and watch the games, and I did like 20 brackets, which is cheating, but none of them did that well. You get to see players from around the country that, unless your team played them, or you just happen to be off on weekends and get to watch all the games on CBS and all the other stations, that you don't really get to see. And so, and it's interesting, the difference between college and the NBA and a lot of it has to do with coaching. College, I've always felt, and I noticed this in the UCLA game against Alabama. No, that was in the Sweet 16 against Michigan. I think Mick Cronin is a really, really good coach. He was really good, and he's already got UCLA in the Final Four. They're an 11 seed, which means they played in the first 4 play-in, whatever they call that. And I think Mick Cronin's a really good coach. But contrast that with Eric Musselman, who's coached at 2 different stops in the NBA. And you notice that Musselman doesn't call a lot of timeouts. I mean, he had to call one very early because Baylor was about to run them out of the gym. But a lot of these coaches just overcoach. And I get it. I mean, it's college kids. You're running a system. In the NBA, the guys are so good that, yeah, you call sets and plays, but if you watch college basketball, the beautiful thing about it is a lot of these teams actually run an offense, and they run a lot of set plays every time down the floor, where the NBA might start out in a set, but the players are so good, a lot of them are so smart that they kind of just feel the game. And so you're acting like, what kind of offense do they run? And it's different in college football because obviously you have to run some sort of offense. You can't just be out there and be like, hey, let's go out there and wing it, right? And so, and also the difference in college is there's a lot of guys in college that aren't going to go to the pros. So the shooting isn't always as good, though it has gotten better in recent years, which I was very happy to see. And so college basketball is great because you get to see these guys. And then, of course, you have guys arguing on the internet like whether or not players are ready for the league and they should stay and loyalty to teammates and all that. And I'm like, look, bro, you got me. And you're going to make the argument, I already know a lot of you are, about they get paid to go to college. But, and the G League now is allowing guys to come straight out of high school and play in the G League, which I think is great because I'm not saying college is a bad thing. Hold on, I'm about to... Had to sneeze there, I apologize. College is a great thing, but it's not for everybody. And I'm not saying the guys aren't smart enough to go, but what if a guy wants to go play basketball for a living and doesn't want to go to college? He doesn't want to go take macroeconomics in college. He doesn't want to go take intro to biology. He can do that in his spare time. And then you go to college and the rules are so strict that, like, no one can lend you any money and all this other stuff, right? And it's amateur athletes, and we pride ourselves on academics, and that's great. Like, if a guy wants to go to college and play college basketball, let him play and let him go to college. But there's nothing wrong with a guy saying, I'm 18. I didn't go to college at 18 because I knew I wasn't ready. And maybe I wasn't ready when I was 20, but I think I was more ready than I would have been at 18. So you got guys that just want to ball. And it's a job. I mean, talk to anyone that's played pro sports. It's a job. And so when they're in college, they have to go to class, and they have to do homework, and they have to write papers. And, they have to go to practice. And, they have to watch film and lift weights and get treatment and then play the games. And then they have to travel on top of that. And we talk about student athletes, and it's just, for me, it's different. Like, I just don't see the problem in a guy wanting to go straight to his profession, right? And this isn't the only instance where, like, you have to go to college to get a profession. I'm not saying that. Because we wouldn't just have someone graduate from high school and then be like, hey, go be a doctor. It's like, no, you got to come and learn these medical terminologies and these processes, and you have to do, like, med school. And like, if you want to be a nurse, you have to go do clinicals and have hands-on. Like, cool, like, I get that, right? But to play basketball, the only way you get better at playing basketball is playing basketball. And so going to college, in one sense, is good because you can... I think a lot of these coaches do try to teach them real life lessons. And I also think that you learn to be away from home for the first time in an environment where everyone is like you, in the sense that if they're not from that town, they're all living away from home probably for the first time too. So you're all trying to figure this college thing out. And college was a great experience for me too. And I'm still going off and on. Like, I'm not graduated yet. But I think that if a guy can go straight to the league, he can. But what the one and done rule, this is where I got off track, so I went on a tangent there. But the one and done rule basically was like, hey, like, you graduate high school and you have to, like, do something for a year but not play in the NBA. Well, then you get a whole bunch of guys like Kyrie Irving. You get guys like Carmelo Anthony. You get guys like Zion Williamson, who are only playing for a year. And so the second semester starts in mid to late January. The regular season ends in February, and then in March it's all conference and NCAA tournament if your team gets there. So you're basically, and the conference tournaments are held at a neutral site, and then the NCAA tournament is held at multiple neutral sites. This year, just one site because of COVID, right? So then you're gone, basically traveling back and forth, except this year they all stayed, right? So, you know, for contact tracing and all that stuff. And so, and by the time the tournament's over, it's like, okay, so I know that I'm going to go to the draft. I didn't get hurt in the tournament. I played well. Everyone that's a scout is telling me and telling the people around me, like, hey, like, you're going to be in the first round. You're going to be, if you're a lottery pick. Like, Zion knew he was going to go number one. Unless something crazy happened, he knew he was going number one. So why go to class for the rest of the time? The season's over. Like, not going to make you ineligible. Now, I mean, if you care about your GPA and you feel like you want to go get your degree, then hey, like, yeah, you might want to finish that thing, you know, finish that semester out. But we took student athlete, we made a joke out of it. See, the NCAA makes you 3 years removed from high school. So, like, you have for 3 years, if you're in college, you have to maintain your grades. And a lot of guys get degrees, and that's a good thing. And I'm not against college. I'm not saying guys shouldn't go play college basketball. But with the G League doing what they're doing, saying, hey, like, these guys can come play in the G League, and we can develop them there. I don't know how much development's going on in the G League. I don't watch it. I just don't have time. I would be interested in watching the G League. And so it's interesting to see that you don't have to get developed at a college. Now, there's a lot of great coaches out there that's been around the country and the world with great experiences. Like, think about going to play for a Coach K, who's coached the U.S. Olympic team. So he's been around NBA players. Think about coaches like Musselman, who's been in the NBA. Think about I'm trying to think of other guys that are coaching. Like I'll bring up Avery Johnson. I know that he didn't do well at Alabama, but think about the experience that he can lend to those players by saying, "Hey, like I coached Dirk Nowitzki. I coached against LeBron James. I've been to the NBA Finals. I won an NBA championship in 1999 with the Spurs. I played with David Robinson. I played for Coach Pop. That's great. How many of these G League coaches can offer that? And I'm not saying either way. Like, this isn't a knock the G League thing. I think it's good. But what's going to happen is if guys can go to the G League and immediately make some money, are they going to want to go to college? So is the NCAA basketball going to turn into a bunch of like second tier players? Because the knock, I hear a lot of this is like if a guy comes out his fourth year, like let's say a guy stays for 4 years, like I think Frank Kaminsky stayed for 4 years and a couple of other guys, right? And maybe Luke Garza. I don't know if Luke Garza is a senior, but let's just say for argument's sake he was. They're like, oh, well, he didn't go after his first or second year. How much better did he really get? So that they think that by year 4 he's reached his NBA potential. And then he's already 22. He goes to the league. He's playing against, like he's been playing against younger college players. Now he's going and playing against grown men, along with the other rookies. And so I think that, and then of course you get the guys that go that aren't ready, but you have people around them saying, "Hey, like, no, dude, you're gonna be great in the NBA." And then they go and they're like, "Oh, like." LeBron spends $1 million a year on his body. Like, this is different. It's a different animal. I mean, I don't mean LeBron's a different animal. I mean the industry's a different animal, right? I don't want that to get misconstrued. Like y'all saying I'm out here calling players animals. No, it's a whole different thing when you get to the NBA and these guys are grown men and you're 19 and your body hasn't fully developed and you've been playing against, in your non-conference schedule, teams that aren't nearly as athletic. And you get to the league and it's like, oh, like, and these dudes are really, really good basketball players. So I think the NCAA tournament's great. The other thing is you can pay the players in the NCAA, but that's a whole nother thing. So it's like, who are you going to pay? Because now the whole thing is about equality, right? So if we're going to pay college players and with Title IX, then we have to pay the women's volleyball and the women's soccer and the women's basketball and softball and baseball and then so, and some of these universities are already cutting athletic programs, especially now with COVID. So who do you pay? Do you pay only the people who you think bring in the revenue? Because there's a whole argument about who brings in the revenue, and I'm not here to argue about who should, like, listen, the NCAA women's tournament, that was atrocious. Like, you can't just be like, oh, well, the men make more money, we're going to accommodate them better. No, like, you're putting on a tournament, like, make sure it's top notch. Or don't put on the tournament. Like, make it equal for everybody in that regard. It's like, hey, like, make sure that everything's up to standard, you know? It doesn't matter about that. But when we're talking about paying players, like, where's this money coming from? And I'm not against the players making money at all. I just don't know. I don't know the logistics of how you would do that, right? That's my biggest thing is, like, okay, so let's say we want to pay the players. How do you do that, right? I mean, you're paying the coach $3 to $5 million a year at the major programs. And so, in the NCAA men's basketball tournament's one of the only tournaments that actually, like, gains a profit during the year. The NCAA loses money on just about every other sport. And so, I'm not against the players, because if you can't get paid in college, then let them go pro, right? Baseball does it. Like, if you don't want to go to college, then you can go to the minor leagues. But I think they make you stay 3 years if you play college baseball. I'm not sure about that. But, and that's something the NCAA might want to evaluate and say, hey, like, to get rid of the one and done, it's like, you can either go to the league, but see, then it's fishy, because it's like you go to the league or you get paid. But what if you go to the league and it doesn't work out and you come back and play college basketball? Like, how do you, the eligibility, right? Like, I mean, if you go to the G League, right? Like, you can't, like, once you make money, they're not going to let you play amateur basketball again, which then we're getting into a whole other thing that I don't even know about. But I've kind of gone over my time a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to bring that up. And I wish all these young men, because they're not kids, they're over the age of 18, they're men, but they're young men. And I wish them all the best. I hope that you just make the best decision for you. Don't listen to these people on Twitter. Don't listen and be like, hey, like, oh, you're disloyal. No, dude. Like, you're doing what's best for you, your future and your family and your future family and your life. Like, so do you. And we should applaud the fact that you're really good at basketball and that you're doing something to better yourself. If that means going to college, go to college, get them grades. But I don't know. Like, I kind of went on a tangent there. But the NCAA tournament's been great. The Final Four is this weekend. The national championship, I think Gonzaga's going to win. I think it'll be Gonzaga-Baylor. But it's been a great tournament, and I think that it's been a great year for college basketball. They survived the pandemic, and congratulations. Well, this has been the Dads in Timeout podcast, the first YouTube video, and we will be back and probably talking about the NBA. There's a lot of NBA got to get to with the Nets and the Lakers and injuries and trades and all that, and JJ Redick. But until then, you can find me on Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, Podcast, Podbean, all that stuff. You can find it at Dads in Timeout. Just type in Dads in Timeout on any of those platforms. You'll find all my episodes from my solo stuff. And then you can type in Rehab Sports Guys on any of those platforms. You can find my archives of my stuff going back to like 2018. And then you can follow me on Twitter at JWillSportsGuy. I think that's it. I think it's at JWillSportsGuy. Should be my Twitter handle, but you can type in Dads in Timeout. I run that page. And then you can also find Ian at neon_sportsguy. And if that's incorrect, then I'll address that in the video description that I post on YouTube. Well, you guys have a blessed day, and I hope you guys tune into the podcast and follow me on Twitter. All right, peace.